Bulavinaka, namaste and good evening. I'm Vijay Narayan. Our guest tonight is Fiji Water Flying Fijians coach Mick Byrne. To talk directly to you, I know you have been messaging me and calling me to get National 15s coach on the show, and he has made himself available for questions brought forward by you, and also that we have prepared based on the plans this year, and of course going into our preparations right up to the Rugby World Cup in 2027, which will be hosted by Australia. Mick, thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Pleasure, Vijay. Great to be here.
1 month away from the big test match against Scotland at home. Everyone is talking about it, the game right here in Suva, and we don't normally get a chance to watch Fiji against Scotland. I believe the last time when Scotland came here and a packed HFC Stadium. We remember it was a very tough test back then, and now coming off one home game for Australia, a test match in Australia, the Flying Fijians travelling there first and playing on July 6th, and then of course then playing Scotland here at home before going on to the Pacific Nations Cup. A good calendar we see, but first of all, Mick, you've been a former assistant coach of the All Blacks, the Wallabies, Scotland, Japan, Saracens, Auckland Blues, and of course the coach of the Swire Shipping Fijian Drua. You have also been a former Aussie rules player. You've played rugby union and rugby league when you were in school, and of course been a former coach, assistant coach also, rugby league in Manly and for the North Sydney Bears. So quite an illustrious lineup you've got of what you've done.
I don't know about illustrious, but when you read it like that, there's certainly been lots of teams. So I live my dad's words of "don't want to die wondering." So I'm not. Yeah. So I think I grew up just a sports fanatic. I love sport. I love playing it. I played it at playtime and lunchtime at school. I'd come in, my shirts would be ripped. I enjoyed school, but the breaks were more about getting out and playing sport. And I was fascinated about learning things as a schoolboy. When I played sport, I wanted to learn how to do things well, and I think that sort of mentality created me something. When I started playing Aussie rules, coach used to say I was a bit of an overthinker, because I was always wanting to learn about things, and so that was something that I had to overcome as a player. Being that sort of person, thinking about the game like I was, it's natural for me to move into coaching. And I can see sometimes now when I'm coaching, I can see a lot of players who are a bit like myself, overthinking at the start, and rather than just doing, probably thinking a bit too much about what if and what about that and should I do this, and just do, and I think so that sort of helped me understand when I started coaching to just help relax players. Why was I an overthinker? Was probably because I didn't want to make mistakes. I wanted to get it right. I wanted to do the right thing. And so now as a coach, you sort of see players like that and you want them to relax, just enjoy themselves. Because
you understand what they're going through.
Yeah, I understand what they're going through, because that's what I was, So that, but having played in all those sports as well and being exposed to different coaching styles, it sort of shaped the way I look at the games and shaped the way I look at rugby, and what skills can I bring out of Aussie rules that really suit the game of rugby.
That's what I wanted to ask you next, is based on all your experiences in different sports and playing that, then coaching, what type of those things are you drawing in based on your experiences and changing your approach for the Drua first and now with the Flying Fijians?
Yes, that's a really good question. I think when I started in rugby league, I grew up playing rugby league, and I played rugby league on the weekend, and I played rugby from the school. I played 11 years of rugby league, and I played 7 years of rugby. And when I switched over to Aussie rules, I had to go to Melbourne. So I went to Melbourne because that was the only place you could play professionally. Towards the end of my career, I came back to Sydney, where I grew up, and a lot of my mates were still involved at rugby and rugby league in Manly, and they're like, can you come down and look at our players, because the kicking and catching is, it's not great. And that was when the fifth tackle laws were coming into the game, so there was a lot of fifth tackle plays, a lot of bombs being put up. So I found a natural movement back into rugby and rugby league around the kicking and catching aspects of the game. But when I got there and looked, you could see aspects of those games that you could bring into rugby, and some of the ability to run good lines and, what they would call unders and overs lines back in the 90s. You look at that and say, gee, I could bring this into rugby, that it could change the way we attack, and all those little things. So, but the one thing that I did feel that rugby could benefit from was just a real kick pass, the low kick passing game in Aussie rules, being able to kick the ball 30, 40 metres, but low and hard, so you could beat players. You could get the ball to a player 40 metres away before a player could defend from 15 metres away if you get a really good kick. So you could get a player that's 40 metres away from you that has the ball basically well before a person that's 15 metres away from him can do anything about it. That player gets the ball, and the rest, we can make some good opportunities to score tries. So that was something that I could see the benefit of bringing into rugby. And then, of course, there are a lot of other things that crossed over. But having that sort of skill set to come into rugby initially was a good window for me to come in and cut my teeth back in rugby, in the coaching game, and have a look around and learn from coaches. The first coach that brought me into rugby was Tim Lane. Tim was coaching Manly at the time. We did some work around the kicking game. He could see some value in that. We won the premiership in '97, which is the last time Manly won a premiership in the Shute Shield. Then he became the Wallabies coach the next year. So then he came to me and brought me into the Wallabies program in '98. So, and I worked with the Wallabies in '98, '99, 2000. And so he could see the value in what we were trying to do, especially with our high ball catching and our long field, territory kicking, box kicking, goal kicking. So that was how I got back into the sort of professional game of rugby.
Now with the Drua, brand new team in 2022, and with the challenges that came with it, we know that during the COVID-19 period, when the Drua started, it had to stay away from its own home in Australia, in Lennox Head, and it brought in a whole lot of challenges for you as a coach, knowing that the team is away from home and all their home games are in Australia, plus all the issues that came with it. How did you manage?
Well, I didn't manage well, to be fair. It was pretty stressful. We got together as a team, I think November 4, when most of the players arrived. I got there November 3, the day before, so I met all my staff and all my players the day we started training. So it was learning on the run about each other. And we were 11 weeks away from playing our first Super Rugby game, so we didn't have a lot of time. We're in the middle of, or the back end of COVID. There was a lot of restrictions around in Australia at the time. We were in New South Wales. You couldn't travel to Victoria. You couldn't travel to Queensland. We were isolated. Fortunately for us, Lake Ainsworth in Lennox Head is a beautiful complex. It's on the beach at Lennox. It's on a lake. It's a natural lake. There's no flow into the lake. It's just a natural lake. We had our own field. We had our cabins. We had our restaurant. We had our gym, all on the premises. So we didn't want for anything. So fortunately for us, we had a fantastic facility. But it doesn't take away from the fact that players have left home. Some people have left their kids. Some younger players had left home out of the village for the first time. We had a couple of players on their plane for the first time, and they came in and hadn't done anything from which I found out when they landed. We started doing some one-on-one interviews with the players about, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you think your strengths are, and so we could get a bit of an understanding. We found out that none of them had done anything since October 2020. So they hadn't done anything for 12 months. They'd been back in the village because of COVID. There'd been no football on the island. So a lot of players had become overweight. They weren't fit. Their mindset was perfect. You know, they were very resilient and hardened people, but just body shape wasn't ready for Super Rugby. So we worked hard, and in the first 10 weeks of training, we dropped 135 kilos as a squad. So combined weight loss for our squad in sort of 10 weeks was 135 kilos. And that's not a reflection of our players, as in, they weren't fit, or they came in, they hadn't done anything for 12 months. You know, they had no choice. So we were faced with, how do we help them get better? How do we make them super ready in 11 weeks? Impossible. But we tried, and full credit to the players. They worked extremely hard. We did a few exercises that they'd never done before. We worked on some anchor harness work. The boys still, when I pull an anchor harness out, all I've got to do is pull it out of the shed, and they shake. You know, they don't like seeing it. But you know, that was tremendous hard work, and they worked hard, and they got through it, all while missing family, all while missing friends. But the other side of it was it really brought us together. It bonded us really well, and being there together was a great thing. You asked a question about what did I learn. I learned a lot about myself in that period of time, because I found that I wanted to have success as a coach, and I could see that we weren't going to be ready for it. So I put a bit of stress on, and you know, fortunately I had great people around me that worked with me, and you know, we sort of I made some mistakes around some of my delivery and things like that, but certainly over time understood better about the players and education. You know, we had probably, I don't know, we had all brand new computers in the players' room, and for 6 weeks no one went in there. You know, and so for me it was like, why aren't the players going in there? And then I realised that they never had that before. So it was a matter of, all right, let's get the analysts in, let's have player meetings. This is what you look for, this is how it works, and educate the players. So I went from taking for granted a few things that would normally happen
in your normal coaching environment.
Yeah, that's right. To saying, well, I'm taking stuff for granted, and I need to go back and start educating. You know, so that was a big learning curve for me, and the players responded really, really well. And you know, we had our first victory, which is another story. Our first victory on the road after floods, that was another challenge. But just the whole playing group, you know, the resilience. I learnt so much about the resilience of Fijian people, because they just got up and went again. It was tremendous.
You came back strongly the next year and the following year after that.
Yeah, well, I think that first year was all about learning. You know, the being in Lake Ainsworth in that confined environment, they had to work. You know, they got up every morning, and they came together for breakfast. We did fijivillage. You know, we got up in the morning and we came together and got activity going, and then we'd have breakfast, and then we'd come into team meeting and we'd train, and then we'd have lunch together, and then, you know, we'd try and get the boys to have a sleep for an hour and a half to recover, and get home. We'd go back to the gym in the afternoon, and then we'd have lotu in the evening, and then we'd have dinner again, and the day would start again, and we're all doing that together. The issue that probably the biggest growth was their off-field work, you know, their recovery, their diet, nutrition, analysis of training, looking at how they're going. And so in the second year, when we built our base at Langalanga there, all of a sudden they knew how to, you know, they knew what the computer systems were about. So you'd come into of a morning, and the players, 4 or 5 of them, are sitting around the computer discussing training and growing the game. And, you know, all of a sudden you're looking at out there going, well, you know, these guys they're right into it now. They're ready to go. And so it was just a matter of having some luck at different times. You know, we got a good penalty against the Crusaders for Kemu to kick that goal over, and a couple of things like that build momentum. And you know, we had a good first year on the island, good second year in Super Rugby.
Now this year people are saying we haven't done as well as the last 2 years, based on not qualifying for the playoffs. Some very close losses there, and a matter of losing games in the last few minutes, and that's how a lot of Super Rugby games are ending up right now, like that. Any team can be knocked out from the defending champion to anyone in the last few minutes of the game, even if the other team or the stronger team is well ahead. That shows the game and the competition, the competitiveness of the competition. But at the same time, people are asking whether we need a bit more maturity in the side in terms of that at those crucial moments, the decision making, which may be still an issue with the average age of Drua players at about 22, 23.
Yeah, they are a young side. I think, if we look at Super Rugby, last year the team that finished sixth won 6 games. Currently the team that's sitting sixth is on 6 wins. So, as far as wins and losses, it's not that much different. As far as the competitive nature of the sport, it is. It's a more competitive environment. But if you take the first 3 games of the Drua this year, they're up against the Brumbies at home. I thought after they scored that try in the corner and the crowd got up on their feet, I thought that was enough to win. But then just, again, maybe lack of experience just allowed the Brumbies back into the game. And then the Hurricanes and Waratahs games, 2 great games. The Drua played extremely well. And just the last, a dropped line out, a knock on, the opposition scored in the last play of the game to win. You give the Drua those 3 games, they're in the finals. So they're not that far away. And I know people are disappointed, but 6 games last year to finish 6th. We won 6 games, but we didn't have enough bonus points. We finished 7th. 6 games this year is currently where the team is sitting 6th. So it might mean that 7 games you might need to win. It depends how the last couple of games go, but you might need to have 7 wins. Well, the Drua would have had those first 3 games. So they're there and thereabouts. The reason for those, I think there's a little bit of decision making. But I think the decision making is probably more earlier in the game when they had a chance to score 2 or 3 tries, and the inexperienced players who are great young players, and they've been coached really well this year. They've been given a great opportunity and licence to play, which has been really pleasing to watch. Just a couple of those decision makings early in the game where they may have been able to put the game away, for example. That's the ones that probably look back and go, we're disappointed about that. So I think it's, like for us, we've got Temu coming in next year, just signed Joji. These are great additions to the squad. Yeah, we're losing a couple of players. And the natural attrition of Super Rugby at the top end of the game is you do lose a couple of players. But we saw this year Motokai Murray stepped up. I saw Tuai's grown into his role in the last coming out of the development squad. Masaki Vothe's come out of the development squad last year, still a young man. Izzy, found his feet at 10 this year. He's still a young man. There's some really good signs of the pathways that are happening around the Fiji Rugby Union pathways into the Drua pathways into professional rugby. And I think it looks really good for the future.
Now, as a foreign coach, Mick, how have you managed to immerse yourself in Fiji's unique rugby culture? How have you managed to adapt to it?
I think for me, look, I enjoy people. I enjoy being around people, and I think when you're in Fiji, the more people around you, the more enjoyment there is. So it's pretty hard not to enjoy yourself in Fiji. Also, through my son, my son Joel came in and worked at the Drua for 3 months in the pre-season. We met a family out at Sikituru, the village in Nandi. They adopted us. So I'm now part of the village at Sikituru, so I'm out there. I was only out there last week, so we go out there. I have a lovo, I have little carver sessions in the village, and they all come around. The kids come around, the families are there. So, and just being in the village and looking at how the village operates and the kids that are running around. And when I look at the kids running around, I think of my players, what they were doing when they were that age, running around the village, and I'm like, this is where they've come from, and I think if you know where you're going, you know where you want to go if you keep an eye on where you've come from. And for me, that was probably the biggest thing, was understanding where they've come from, because as a foreign coach, I didn't go to a private school. I was I was public school, came from working class family. My dad had 3 jobs, he wasn't home much. So I grew up with that type of thing around family and being, I had 4, there was 5 of us, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. So, and I grew up as a Catholic. So, you know, I sort of, when I come into Fiji and I go into the village, I see, you know, there's a lot of people here that are striving to be better, but you understand where our players have come from. So you dig in and help them. You really want to help them get better. You really want to help them achieve what they want to achieve. And when you see people like, you know, Semi-Ranrandra now, you know, when he comes back from overseas, his time spent at Parramatta, his time spent at Bristol, you know, his time now at Leon, he comes back and he's very generous, and you can see why, you know, that he comes back and he's very generous in how he presents himself back to his village and back to the people. And I think that's inspiring, you know. So for me, as a foreign coach, I was only a foreign coach for a very short period of time, because my mentality as a foreign coach changed very quickly. And you have to understand, you know, the local environment. I always think to understand someone, you know, they sort of wear their shoes, you know what they used to say, you know, wear their boots. And so that's what I try and do. I try and understand where people are coming from so I can understand how I can help them better.
So you're Kai Sikituru now?
Hey, that's it. Kai Sikituru. And so when we get around and we introduce ourselves, sort of Mick Byrne, Kai Sikituru, Nandi. So, yep, the boys get a bit of a laugh out of that, but, you know, that's where I am. That's who I am.
You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. We'll be back after this break. About 20 years ago, we had a major drug bust, and you would remember, you would have been part of the operations at Laudala Beach. A lot of people in Fiji did not know what was methamphetamine. And what we are picking up on, people are saying it's readily available. Just an issue in relation to General Secretary. Was that a tactical move that he ejected himself from Parliament?
Personally, it's unfortunate.
How are you dealing with those police officers who may be allegedly involved in this?
No one is above the law. We assure you that we will be having police officers around.
As a result of that bad policy, by the end of this month, we would have lost close to about $70 million in government revenue.
Bula Vinaka, I'm Vijay Narayan. This is Fiji Village Straight Talk.
Fiji Village Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan. Watch it live on the Fiji Village Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Welcome back. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. Our guest tonight is Fiji Water Flying Fijians coach Mick Byrne. And we're talking about rugby here and also about Mick's journey. Kai Sikituru, you heard it here first on Straight Talk. So next time you meet him on the streets, make sure you greet him with that. I'm sure he would love that. Mick, we are playing the Wallabies on July 6th in Australia. And then, of course, that mouth-watering clash against Scotland right here at home in Suva on July 12th. Those are the 2 big test matches, and then we move on to the Pacific Nations Cup. We are not getting a number of games. I think PNC matches, most of them are out of Fiji. So the Scotland game is quite a blessing for the rugby fans here. When do we start preparations? We know as a coach you have been preparing already, but when does the team start getting preparations done?
We'll come together on the 26th of June in Nandi and travel on the 27th, and the players from the Northern Hemisphere will travel down into Sydney on the 27th, and we'll all join up. And these are the challenges that we have as a nation, and, you know, Tonga and Samoa and you know, a couple of other teams have the similar challenges. Is, you know, Australia, for example, and New Zealand. You know, Australia, I know, have had 3 camps, called in a squad of players. They come in, they have camps. Then they'll come together at the end of Super Rugby, and as the teams drop out of the finals, they'll sort of come into camp. And Australia, you know, my understanding, speaking to people in Australia, that the Australian players will probably have about 30 days together before they play us in our test match. We'll come together the week before. We'll probably come in from 15 different environments. We'll all come in and we'll try and get our stuff together in a week. I've got great coaches who are very, their ability to adapt and adjust is awesome. They're not precious about their, this thing. But a lot of coaches would be looking at this going, oh, this is impossible, how do you do this? But they just have a great attitude to the way we do things, and they get on, and we're preparing the team, and we'll have a couple of days together before we start training. We'll get some good clarity in, and then we'll have 3 good training sessions that week where we come together. While that sounds like a challenge to people that maybe in Australia and New Zealand are looking and going, oh, how do you do that? For us, it's part of the way we operate. That's the way it's always been. So our players understand we've got to come together, and we've got to come together quickly. So when they come in, they're really active participants in getting together and forming a relationship and getting to know what it is we're trying to do. And rugby's not a complicated game. They understand. As soon as they sit down and say, how are we playing? That's fine. Look, we're choosing to play this way. Well, they just say that, well, I play this way at my club, and this is the system I work in, or this is the structure I work in. What's our structure? If you're clear and with your understanding, and you have good clarity around what it is you want to do, and you get that out nice and early, our players are world-class players. They'll get on and they'll do. So the pressure comes on to make sure that we're really clear in our messaging early in the week. Our players come in with a great open mind, what it is, how are we doing it, what's the structure that we're going to play under, what are our systems. They understand that's the game, and they get on with it. So we'll come together 27th of June in Newcastle. We're at the Novotel, which is a 5-minute walk up from the beach. Unfortunately, it's in July. It would have been great if it was in December. But that would have been awesome to be around the beach and out the weather. But we're in July, so that's okay. But we're at the Novotel. We're training out of Newcastle Uni, which is a great facility. So we're going to be well looked after, and we're going to prepare well. Obviously, we know the Wallabies have got a Lions series in, and been involved in a Lions series, and you know what that excitement happens in the country. So you know that those players playing for the Wallabies will want to be part of that Lions series. So they're going to be up for it. So we have to make sure that we're ready to go and meet them at the start of that test match.
As a coach, how do you manage in terms of monitoring players? They're off-site. You know most of your players that you'll be choosing. You don't have your eyes on them very early. As you said, those are the challenges. So how does the monitoring happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. David Sylvester doesn't like being called David. He says only Mum calls him David. But so Tweedy's our S&C. He's in England, and he looks after the Northern Hemisphere players on contact basis. And I catch up with him early in the year. You're sort of not great. We just finished December, so we leave it alone for about 6 or 7 weeks, and then we sort of touch base once a week, once every 10 days. David's chatting to all the players, finding out about how they're going, finding about how they're training, if they've got any injuries, looking at their game minutes, and we review all that, and we chat, and I'll ask him about this player. Look, this player's come up on the radar. He'll reach out to that player and have a chat, and so he's monitoring their movements every week. He'll update me on an injury. When Albert Tuisue did his arm, he got updated on that. When Petheliato did his ankle, we'll get an update on that. So you're updating as the player's going. So he does a great job for us up there. And down here in the Drua, obviously, I live 5 minutes from the facility. This year, early on, just let them get on without me and let the coaches find their way. And I've just been into a few training sessions. Had a great catch up with the coaches last week. They've been really open and shared a lot of their insights into the players. So, we're getting a lot of good information from great people that are coming into us. And then as a coaching group, we're sitting down and we've had probably 4 good chats around it. And we're narrowing our squad down, and we'd like to, hopefully, after this weekend, probably have a look at some of the Northern Hemisphere teams where they're at. And then we'd like to think we're in a position to name a wider squad, that first week of June, towards the end of that first week of June. We should be right to name a squad, which will be a wider squad, not necessarily the team.
How does it work with the Drua? You still have a level of involvement, being Drua's being seen as a feeder team?
Yeah, I think definitely it's there's a strong relationship. It's probably the relationship is more with, Baden Stevenson, the general manager. I've had more chats to him than the coaches, because I think the coaches just want to get on and, they don't need the I know I'm the head coach of the national team, but I'm also the ex-coach of the Drua, so they don't need me hanging around too much. They're forming new relationships with players, and that's going great. I've had coffees with the coaches at different times, but basically, if there's any structural things I'm working on from a national body to pathways with Drua, it's with Baden Stevenson, the general manager. I have great conversations with him and working through how the season looks and how it unfolds. And as I said just recently, I had a great catch up with the coaches, and they've given me some really good understanding around how the players have been training. I've been to a few trainings and I go to all the games, so and I understand the players pretty well. So just letting them settle in their own environment.
So just an example, if for the Flying Fijians, if they're looking at depth in a position, say for example like a halfback position, and you want to see Philip Baselala play more, will there be a conversation between you and the Drua that could he play more games? Because
probably conversation with me and Jacko just about how's Philip going. I would never ever even think about saying to Jacko, can you start playing Philip, just asking how he's going, because we knew when Frank did his shoulder, where's the halfbacks going? Philip's been there. I know Philip's a good young player. He's been there a couple of years. He had bad injury. He's come over. He's still not where he needs to be, but he's back playing, and he started last weekend. So, just asking, more about how are they going, and you get good feedback. And not as fit as he could be. Philip knows that. He's probably shared it himself publicly. But he's getting fitter. He's enjoyed last week, and he'll do whatever he needs to do to get better. So, and he's a great young player, and he'll get better as the years go. So it's just finding out, asking about how he's going and how is he going, and rather than being involved in any of selecting where you're thinking of playing him, or none of those conversations. It's more about how's he going. And getting some honest feedback from the coaches.
So you name your wider squad, and when do you name your squad?
Probably, I'd say mid-June. We'll be looking to do that. I'm thinking around the 13th or 14th of June. I haven't got a date just yet. Trying to look at the French competition. At the moment, if the French competition goes to favouritism, we probably won't have anyone in that. But if one of our playing teams, upset the apple cart and have an upset, they could be playing on that weekend, which is the weekend we play Australia. So it's just working those sort of checks and balances off there. So I'd say by mid-June we'd probably be in a position to name our team. I'm guessing around sort of the 14th or 15th of June would be. We'll make that announcement pretty soon.
So how does it work with, for example, the Europe-based players, because their season is still on, and where does it fit in terms of national duties for Fiji?
Well, we know with the Northern Hemisphere, they have a Reg 9, which is World Rugby's standard that says you can have test matches in this window, and the clubs have to release the players. We know some clubs put pressure on players, that's okay, but the players really want to play for Fiji. So speaking to them, they've all made themselves available in that they're available to play. When I say they all want to play, sometimes, like last year, we had a couple of players that were leaving countries, shifting house. And I'm not sure there'd be too many men in the world that would let their wives shift the house with 2 kids on their own if they were just shifting suburb, let alone country. So that's a very good reason for a player to say, look, I don't think I can make it for this campaign. And we're faith and family first. So those types of issues, what's the reason why they can't play? It's not because they don't want to play. So we understand that. This year, I think most of our players are in a situation where those things aren't around, and they've made themselves available to play. So we should be able to select near enough, given injuries, to one of our strongest teams to come down and play versus Australia and Scotland.
Who are you eyeing from the Super Rugby competition apart from the Drua players, of course?
That's a great question. This is probably going to be a little bit controversial because I'm working on something at the moment. Look, there's Fijian players that want to play for us. Unfortunately, they can't. So Jacob Neepkins down at the Highlanders, he's a fullback. We had a bit of a brief chat to him. Jonah Nareki had a brief chat. They'd be keen to play for Fiji. Their contract with New Zealand doesn't allow it because of a clause that they've got to be available for the All Blacks. So, that holds us back because players are saying, "Yeah, we'd like to play, but that we can't actually sign them." So, I'm sort of working with our CEO here to sort of have a conversation that says, when do those players actually? When can they become available? Because at the moment, every player playing in New Zealand, from Tongan, Samoa, Fiji, and all the European guys, they're all available to play for the All Blacks. Doesn't matter what nationality, And even now, I'm seeing that, like Timothy was at Highlanders. He was at Moana last year. Tavatavanawa. He's come to the Highlanders, but he's going to pursue an All Blacks. We couldn't pick him anyway. So New Zealand get to pick players from 4 or 5 countries. We're just saying we just like to have our Fijians play for Fiji. At some stage, it'd be great for them to say he's not going to be an All Black, so we'll actually release him, and that would be a really good thing for New Zealand rugby to do. For us anyway, for Fiji, to be able to release a couple of players that they haven't picked for 5 years, probably won't pick for the All Blacks. It'd be great for them to say, well, actually, they can play for Fiji, and we'll still honour their Super Rugby contract, because that's the thing the players are worried about. That if they come and play for us, they may not be able to get their Super Rugby contract honoured. So just working, I'm still working through all that. I don't know. I'm not 100% on the black and white contracts, but that's how it sits at the moment. So, I'm in the process of, I'm sort of preempting now, so I better ring Chris Lendrum tomorrow now before this gets out.
My concern is that it from our perspective, it just looks like it's bullying, because if you are not, you're likely not choosing these players, but then you've locked them down in this clause, and maybe allow, or if they are not picked.
Yeah, I think now it's a situation like, I'm not sure it's a bully at the start, because a lot of those players chose to go there to play for the All Blacks. They're in New Zealand, they're playing for the Chiefs, they're playing for the Highlanders, playing for the Hurricanes or whatever, the Blues, and they're giving themselves an opportunity to play for the All Blacks, and no one can begrudge them of that. Because it's a great team to be, if you get selected in the All Blacks, it's a great honour. But there comes a time where you haven't been selected after a number of years, that you're then like, well, you know what, I'd really love to play for my country. And that's the case we're talking about. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3 players that have been down there for 4 or 5 years and haven't been selected, possibly won't get selected. And we'd love to have them and consider them for the national team.
I actually had those three names in my list from Super Rugby: Timothy Tavatavanawa, Jonah Nareki, and Jacob Ratumai Tavuki Nipkin. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, and all the best with your negotiations. Hopefully, New Zealand Rugby comes forward and maybe agrees that they are not playing for the All Blacks if they are not chosen, and gives that opportunity to Fiji. We'll be looking out for that, and maybe also asking some questions of them. Who else are you looking at?
Look, I think that's probably, at the moment, that'd be the 3. I've spoken to Peter Gus. He becomes available. His All Blacks, post-All Black career finishes on July 6th. He's actually coming out to Fiji to get married, so congratulations to Peter Gus. He's coming to Fiji to get married to his beautiful bride, and so we'll chat with him. But he's really happy to
He wants
be
to
part
play
of
for
it.
Fiji?
Yeah. I sat down with him, and he's been playing well at Clermont. I sat down with him. I went over there earlier in the year. He's excited for it. I asked if it was a potential for him to be able to come and have a look at us. He's getting married on the 5th of July. We're back here on the 7th of July. Would he want to come into camp, thinking, well, he's on his honeymoon, Oh no, the wife's fine, she'll support me, I'll come in. So that type of, attitude is awesome. So we'll probably get him to come in and meet everyone just to say good day and work through that. I've spoken to George Bauer. We've spoken with Hoskins Satutu. They become available at the end of the year. They're sort of at the moment, George has just re-signed with the Crusaders, so he's got a New Zealand contract. Maybe he's not far away from back up to the All Blacks. I'm not sure where they're thinking. Hoskins hasn't been picked for the All Blacks for 3 years, but he's still contracted to the Blues. So, there are another couple of players that would be keen to play for Fiji, but they're tied up in New Zealand contracts. Maybe both of them are still there and thereabouts in the All Black reckoning. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking, but there'll be players we're chatting about the opportunity. So, there's 3 or 4 players there that we'd like to be able to consider for selection. We're not saying we'd guarantee select them, but they're players that are going to be definitely in the conversation around selection.
What about the Europe-based players?
Yeah, well, we've got 70 odd players at the moment that are on our list. There's a lot of players there that, 33, 34 that are playing reasonable rugby, but you're looking in 27, they're going to be 38, 39, they might have retired. So we've got to have an eye. We definitely have to have an eye on 27.
You're starting to look at...
we're starting to look at 27 because last year was okay, 24.
Yep.
We just get our players in and get everyone that did a great job at the World Cup, bring them back together. But now we're starting to look, and some players are probably not going to be playing in 27. So we've got to start making some change. So that's our process. We're sort of transitioning into a 2027 squad this year. So there's a couple of players that are still there that we're going to give every opportunity to, because they're playing good rugby now. They look like they could play another couple of seasons. But we'll just give them an opportunity to come in and be part of the national team. And if they can play for the national team against Australia and Scotland and England and France later in the year and our P&C, if they're still able to perform in the international arena, well, they're still performing in the international arena, they'll be part of our squad. So, but we do definitely sit down and we're definitely looking at what they'll be like in 2027, because we can't wait to 27 to put our World Cup squad together. It just doesn't make sense. There's too much work to get done in a very short period of time.
You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. We'll be back after this break. About 20 years ago, we had a major drug bust, and you would remember, you would have been part of the operations at Laudala Beach. A lot of people in Fiji did not know what was methamphetamine. And what we are picking up on, people are saying it's readily available. Just the issue in relation to General Secretary, was that a tactical move that he ejected himself from Parliament?
Personally, it's unfortunate.
How are you dealing with those police officers who may be allegedly involved in this?
Vijay, no one is above the law.
We assure you that we will be having police officers around.
As a result of that bad policy, by the end of this month, we would have lost close to about $70 million in government revenue.
Bula Vinaka, I'm Vijay Narayan. This is Fiji Village Straight Talk.
Fiji Village Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan. Watch it live on the Fiji Village Facebook page and YouTube channel.
You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan, and our guest tonight is Fiji Water Flying Fijians coach Mick Byrne. Mick, how are we expected to get Fiji's playing style with the maintaining of discipline? We know sometimes there's passes that are being thrown, even players not looking at each other. Just that type of rugby taking its form and making sure that we get our set pieces right, but we still have this unorthodox style of playing rugby.
Yeah, it's our strength and sometimes our weakness. Our ability to improvise, I think, where our ability to play off turnover ball, our ability to play off a line break, the excitement that comes to our players when those situations occur, goes right back to the village game, when kids are throwing the ball around or, just playing in the village and having a great time. That's instinct, that cognitive behaviour, which is, our learned behaviour. It's just instinct. And that's in all our players. So trying to help them, make some decisions around, better decisions when they get excited like that, that's a challenge. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to change it. Just try and, because some of the stuff we score tries. We score some great tries when we do that. And we score tries that, Steve Larkham, I remember talking to him, you guys score tries that other teams don't score. And he's a great coach, and that's one of the threats we carry. We just have to keep working towards it. One of the other things for us comes back to coming together and only having 3 training days. It's hard to instill, a style that is disciplined in the way we play when we're bringing players in from 15 or 16 different environments and coming together and training for 3 days. It's, that's one of our challenges. It's something we need to work on. I thought our discipline around our defence last year improved. I think we went through November and we didn't give 1 offside penalty until we played Ireland. I think we gave 2 against Ireland, but prior to that we hadn't actually given an offside penalty in November. So our discipline is improving in certain aspects of the game. But yeah, I think the frustration of throwing away good ball or, it's just through excitement, and it's a strength. And we don't want to, for the sake of our team, for the sake of our fans, for the sake of the way we play, we don't want to stifle and go away from...
You don't want to out-coach them.
Absolutely.
Strength.
Absolutely, that's the strength. It's just making them aware, there's an opportunity there. Instead of throwing that last pass as you're falling to the ground over the back of your head, go to ground, double movement back, get back there, present the ball, and then we'll go again and we'll get them on the other side of the field. That mindset is just starting to creep into our team, and we'll continue to drive that. But then at the same time, we've scored a great try as we go into the ground. We throw it over the back of the head, the winger catches it, and we score a great try.
It looks beautiful.
And the crowd's on their feet, and we're having a great time. So it's one of those things that we're working on. But you're right, Vijay. We don't want to out-coach it. We don't want to coach it out of them, and that's the challenge we have.
We talked about the short test window. It's definitely a difficult thing to do, Mick. You have people coming from Super Rugby, people coming from the Drua. You have people coming from Europe and other places in the world. And you've got a very short window before you get the players ready. How difficult is that?
I think it's extremely difficult. But as I said, the coaching group we have, Aaron Major, Graham Hughes, Sarah Bai, great people, and they don't see that as a challenge from a point of view of a negative. They see it as a challenge from a positive. What can we do? How can we make it work? How can we get our players on the right page? Keeping our critical moments right in front of the players, rather than having a whole range of things we've got to get done. What's the most important? We get those things done. And keeping an open mind and optimistic around, we'll get it right. We'll get it right, because we know our players want to play. They love playing. We just got to try and understand the clarity around our lineouts, our back strikes, how we want to set up ourselves around the field, and just get that clarity. Once our players have clarity, they're fantastic players.
Now, you talked about looking ahead to 2027, and it's great because there definitely needs to be succession planning now rather than going into next year and then scratching your head and saying, okay, who do I have available? This person is getting a bit over the age of professional rugby at that level. 2023, we started off, we lost to Wales. We could have won that game, no doubt about that. We beat Australia, we beat Georgia, and then that close loss to Portugal. We managed to scrape through into the top 8, played in the quarter-final against England. Of course, we had beaten England earlier on in a test match at home in Twickenham, and hopes were high, but we missed out. Now, that sets us up quite well for the next World Cup, and it's in Australia on our side of the world.
Yeah.
What are your expectations as a coach going forward to 2027?
Definitely, we want to be taking a step further. I mean, we want to be better. We want to be better than we were at the last World Cup. And if we're better than we were at the last World Cup, we're in the top 4. We went from top 8, we go to top 4. That's a legitimate target for us. It has to be. And that's why we play the game. Our challenges, as you mentioned quite rightly, we've got players coming from sort of 15 different events, from French rugby, from English rugby. From last year we had a couple of Scots, we got Welsh. We've got different rugby environments all coming together. But the thing for me, when I looked at the 23 preparation, because they trained out of the Drua base, and out of my office I looked out the window and I could see the players when they came together on that first day. You looked and they all came from different environments. Some players had played a lot of footy, some players hadn't played much, their training load was poor, and they were starting from a really low base. They trained enormously hard. They went away to Taumuni, came back from that camp, different body shapes, amazing fitness levels. They went into PNC, and I think we saw against Japan in PNC, they played a really fast game of footy. Then they went over and they played in France and they played well, and then they beat England. Then they could have beaten Wales, they beat Australia, and then they just started to drop off a little bit, and it's because of all the work they did to get to that level. So our challenge, and the challenge I'm going to lay to the players, is can you turn up as fit as you were the day you played Australia? Can you turn up to our World Cup camp like that? If you can turn up as fit as we were when we played Australia at the beginning of our World Cup campaign, everything else is a bonus. And that's our challenge. That's the challenge I'm going to lay to the players. That's the challenge for our squad. If we can turn up and be the fittest team in the World Cup, we are a legitimate chance to take another step.
The other issue is about other nations that we're competing against have deeper pockets, can put in clauses that where we cannot see our players playing for the Flying Fijians because of they may be playing in a competition, they've got their livelihood based on that, and then you cannot just come out and play for the Flying Fijians. The issue of infrastructure and the issue of funding, the significant gaps. What do you think has to be done to help in that cause as well?
Well, it's a real challenge. I mean, World Rugby contribute because they want to see all the nations, and they contribute to us like they contribute to all the other nations, tier 2, tier 3 nations around the world, continue to invest money in. The money to come in from the national group as well, and from sponsors. We understand also our currency. When we put in a Fijian dollar, we're putting in, I think, 40 pence. So we for every pound that gets put into rugby in England is costing us 3 times that. So we have to find 3 times the amount of money to manage our program compared to some countries, and that's the challenge. And not only that, we've also got our 7s, men's and women's, our 15s, men's and women's. We've got our local domestic competition. We're growing, and it's a real challenge. Funding is a big challenge. That's why Fiji Water, the sponsorship that they provide is unbelievable. I think they'd have to be close to one of the best sponsors in world rugby. Fiji Airways help us out, with sponsorship. Our sponsors that are contributing to our program are massively important for us, because, as you say, the organisations don't have the deep pockets that some of the other organisations have. For example, 74,000 people turned up at Murrayfield. Now, someone from Scotland will probably set me right on this, but my understanding is that was worth about £8 or £9 million to Scottish rugby. And we just don't get that. We don't get those ticket sales here. So there's got to be other ways. We've got to find money, and that's our challenge. We have to be a little bit more creative in how we provide that. We've also got to be a little bit more careful in the way we spend it, and we've got to make sure that when we do spend $1 somewhere, that we're getting an ROI, our return on investment, comes back. And that's a real challenge for us. It's a big challenge. I mean, the Drua are doing a great job with, Mark Evans and Baden Stevenson there and running that organisation, and the ability to come back and get Temo back and to get Georgie to come in while losing a couple of other players. They're managing their program really well. And we have to do the same thing here. We have to be able to develop our younger players, try and keep them on the island. I know the Drua are doing a great job there, but we have to try and keep our younger players in the system as well. Our under-20s are going away now, and we need to see them grow and develop, and that's the future of the game there. But we want those under-20s to be able to come into the Drua. If they do go to New Zealand, we run the chance of, if they end up going to a New Zealand team, we run the chance of losing them moving forward.
Issue also in relation to pay and allowances. The last World Cup, after that, some horror stories coming out. The players eventually got paid. It was out in the open, publicly, all the accounts were shown. But there were some revelations made about some players talking about player strikes, etc. You wouldn't want to have that in a campaign, knowing that pay issues and allowance issues are something that is bothering the players.
Look,
what are your thoughts on that, knowing that you are now the coach, and that's something that you definitely wouldn't want in camp?
No, look, I think one of the key things, and this is the thing you talk about deep pockets, is our cash flow. Where does our money come and when does it come? And trying to work a way that says, well, we know that our cash flow is such, we're getting, our sponsorship money is due in July. I don't know. I'm just trying to work around things in my head. That we've got some big payments that are going to happen in July. We're going to have the national team come together, and there's allowances and travel and hotels. Suddenly our expenses are going to be really high. Does our income at that period of the year match it? Otherwise we're going to be finding ourselves short because we're waiting on some cash injection from either World Rugby or a sponsor or the organisation that doesn't come in until the end of July. I'm just guessing. I don't know the facts, but I'm just saying that in a conceptual basis, our cash flow, when does it come in, and does it marry our expenses when they go up? Because if they are, we can prepare for that. We can say we've got a cash flow problem in July. Well, then how can we fix that? And work on that, and then the players will get paid, and there won't be any issues. The players got paid, and the players will always get paid. But it's just the time of it, the timely nature of it, and how it works. Because when you're in camp and you're busting yourself at training and you're away from your family, these are stresses that people don't understand. I speak to a lot of my personal friends, and they're like, if I was away from my wife and kids for a week, that would create problems at home, And I'm like, yeah, well, we're away for 7 weeks sometimes. So, our families are resilient as well. But it does create issues. And if we're not looking after our families while we're away on tour, that can create issues. So these are all the things that we're currently looking at and working with, and, working with the new board, etc., about understanding the pressures that come at players when they're away from home. And sometimes players are away from home, they're 30-hour flights away from home. They can't just be there tomorrow, So these are added stresses that need to be taken into account. And as an organisation, we're trying our best to manage those unique situations that a lot of other organisations that have the deep pockets don't have.
Now, rugby is the heartbeat of Fiji. When there's a loss in a rugby match, it seems like the loss feels personal for the people in Fiji.
It is personal.
How do you handle the weight of representing the team where you have fans like that?
Yeah, well, I think the expectations of our fans is something that should be, we should walk towards. You know, that we have that same expectation internally. And when you do lose, it's personal. You know, you go home and you don't sleep. You know, you toss and turn all night. Sometimes you don't go to bed. You're up watching video. Where can I get better? How can we get better? Did I have a good week? What could I have done better as a coach to get the week? All these questions are, and all our coaches go through the same thing. So it is personal. You know, how could I have got better? Could I have done better during the week? And once you've answered those questions, then you can start looking at the team. And then you start working at the team. What can we get better at? And then tomorrow you get up and you know, if you've had any sleep, you get on with it. And then the Monday you do your review and it all starts again. So, but the expectations of our fans, it's great because we have the same expectations. And, you know, we know the success of our team and we know our fans. No matter where we travel in the world, there's blue flags all around the ground. Our fans turn up, our communities, our Fijian communities turn up and they're loud, they're the best supporters, they're the loudest supporters in the world, and it's awesome. So, and they give passionate, they give their emotion to the game. So once you start giving yourself emotionally, that's a personal investment. So it is personal. There's no way around it. And we just basically want the fans to know that we take it personally as well. You know, it hurts us. It hurts us as well, and we get up and we try and do something about it. If we haven't had the success, when we have had the success, you know, we understand the joy that it brings to our people, and it brings the same joy to us as well.
Now, when the media questions or the people question your selections, your tactics, how do you stay focused and stay focused on your vision?
Look, I think for me, my work is around the people that I'm working with and our coaches, and we sit down and when we make our selections and we have our game plan and we analyse that and we're super critical around did we get everything right, how could we have got better, and we stay in that arena. You know, we stay there. The people out here, family, friends, fans, media, all got an idea, all got a thought. We can't bounce around all those ideas. You know, the answers are going to be in our arena. You know, if we get our arena right, then the answers are there. There's a lot of opinions out there, and they're great, and that's awesome. You know, and some of those opinions are the same as ours. There's a lot of opinions that come from outside our arena, if you like, that are the same as ours, and we agree. And so we're working on those as well. But we got to stay focused there. And the minute if I started worrying about some of my friends or family ringing me up going, you know, saying some of the things, or some fans saying some things, if I started trying to deal with all that, I take my eye off where the answer is. The answer lies within our group. We have to get that right. And people think we're not listening. It's not that we're not listening. We've got the same, some of the points that are made, we've got the same points, but in our arena, that's where the answer lies, and we've got to fix it there.
How do you tackle the growing misinformation and disinformation now with platforms like social media? Yeah,
look, it's a challenge. You know, no one in social media has actually interviewed me. No one's actually asked me anything. There's been stories put in social media that are totally incorrect. There was a story last year around Luke Tungy about me sacking him out of the squad, which was totally incorrect. The issue there creates a whole lot of comment, creates a whole lot of angst. You know, Itaki comments around me and my position and me and my family, you know, all that stuff is there, and it didn't happen. So, you know, I think from a social media perspective, I think it's a vital role. They play a vital role, because a lot of people through Facebook and other things in Fiji. That's how they get their information. But I think it's really important that they can have an opinion. An opinion based on fact is awesome. But to put stuff out there that's not true, that's the stuff that I don't like about it. Because it just gives a person an opportunity to make something up. And then it runs arms and legs from there, you know. I'd like to, you know, sit down with the social media, have an interview and say, you know, for them to say, listen, we've heard that this happened. I say, oh no, it didn't happen. This is what happened. This is the fact. And then print that. But sometimes that story doesn't get as many hits, you know. So as the old one I said, when I grew up, they used to say, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story, you know, when I grew up as a kid. So I think that's for me. I think social media is great. I think it's a way that the majority of people in Fiji are connecting with us. I'd love to connect with the social media people and, you know, be available for interviews and things like that. I've never said no to an interview because I've never been asked. So it's there. It's there.
Mick, definitely a coach makes a lot of personal sacrifices ahead of always the team is at the front line. That's the way it's always been. If you can talk about what are some of the personal sacrifices you've had to make for this role that fans might not realize?
Oh, I think personal is, you know, the first personal part is family, you know, so you're away from your family. I chose to do this role. I've chosen to live in Fiji full time. I think the role deserves that respect. You know, I can't ask my family to uproot and move into Fiji. Like when I moved here, every morning I go into the office at the Drua, there's 50 real good friends. You know, there's banter, you're having meals with them every day, you're spending 12 hours, there's a lot of banter, a lot of fun, and you're having a great time while doing the work. Meanwhile, if your family's here, they're sitting at home, not with many people around, don't have family, don't have friends. There's only so many things they can do in a day. It's not a great life for the family. So for me to come and live here, leave the family behind, you know. So that's a sacrifice, you know, and it's more a sacrifice for them because, as I said, I turn up every day and I've got 50 mates around me, you know, while they're, you know, and some of them are good mates and some of them will be mates for life. But the family don't have that, so it's difficult. So that's the first one, you know. I guess that's probably the most, the biggest personal sacrifice. I think the other things are the stuff you take for granted around your lifestyle. You know, the lifestyle you live. You know, I haven't stepped on my longboard for a number of years now, so that's another challenge. The cloud break's too dangerous. I'm too old to get out at cloud break now, but you know that those types of things, you know, but they're nothing. They're nothing for the joy you get from being here. The biggest one is family.
Mick, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to come on Fiji Village Straight Talk and talking directly to the people. No doubt this will not be the only time you'll appear on Straight Talk as we start our journey to the 2027 Rugby World Cup.
I look forward to it.
And a final message from you in relation to the home game that's coming up against Scotland on July 12th?
Yeah, well, I think for me, you know, our fans don't get to see they don't get to see our team very often. And what the team don't get to see our fans very often too. So it works both ways. So our team is here on the 12th of July. We've got Scotland and then we've got Tonga. But in the Scotland game, it would be great for our team to have the ground and the stands full, so our team can experience what it's like to have a full stadium of Fijian fans. And the fans will get a chance to see our team. Probably one of our strongest teams will be able to put together, come here and do the job against Scotland. And unfortunately, we don't have a series of games. We don't have 3 or 4 games that we can come and be part of. At this stage, we've got one game against Scotland, and you know, it'd be fantastic to have all our fans there cheering on our flying Fijians, and I know our players, especially our Northern Hemisphere players, so excited to come back and play in front of our fans. It's going to be great.
Mick, all the best against the
Vijay,
Wallabies
thank you very
on
much.
July 6th, and
Awesome.
of course against the Scotland here at home. No doubt we'll be cheering you and the Flying Fijians on. And that's our show for tonight. Until next week, have a great evening.